Great, thank you. So we've got the ISLRTC being set up. We have, which is the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center, which is working on the dictionary of Indian Sign Language, which is also available online through YouTube videos. So there is a lot of work happening there. And the recent RPWD, which is the Rights of the People with Disabilities, also mentions that sign language is to be used as an accessibility for deaf people, either in education, mostly in education, but even in other areas like in jobs or accessibility to general information. So there is a widespread recognition, even in the latest NEP, which is the National Education Policy, which in 2020 was announced, also mentions use of sign language in schools and teachers having to learn this to be able to educate. Like Rahul was mentioning, there are about 700 or 800 schools, deaf schools, where only deaf children go and study there. Whereas sign language is not the medium of education that is in any of these schools, used in these schools. So the language earlier on was not propagated, was not encouraged, but now it is slowly seeing acceptance and relevance in increasing education awareness for the deaf community. Recently, the World Hearing Report was launched by the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, which was which focuses, as we all know, on the health of people worldwide. And March 3rd is recognized as the World Hearing Day, where the World Health Organization sends out various information on care of the ear and the hearing. But for the first time this year, they have included sign language to be an important part of rehabilitation of deaf people, and even with people who may have hearing loss at a later stage. So these are all very good signs for the deaf community who have been really struggling to get recognition of their language, which is their right as a human right to have their own language in their own accessible way. But these are really positive and good signs. And having workshops like this is definitely another sign where many people outside of the deaf community are interested to know this different world, get to know about this world, which is so beautiful, which is so expressive with the language that we are using. So great, thank you very much. And at the end, I would also like to say that sign language is not only restricted to the deaf community, but you will see another set of people who use sign language, but in different forms. Like you have additional disabilities along with deafness. So we have a group of people who have deaf blindness, who also use sign language, and which is very important for them for communication. And the language that they use is tactile sign language. So similarly, we have other disabilities. Along with that, deafness is also prevalent. It could be autism with deafness. It could be cerebral palsy with deafness. So having all these prevalences only makes the case stronger that sign language is a language that is necessary, not just a want, but it is a necessity for deaf people to be able to access communication, education, jobs, and any other information that they want to. Right. So I just want to ask either Mr. Gopalakrishnan or Rahul to tell us, in a very interesting. I know that both of you are from different. I shouldn't say generation, but both of you are from different times. You have seen, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, you have seen a different time where technology was not there for you to access as today Rahul probably has seen. Right. So can you just tell us your experiences with being able to communicate, even though sign language was your language? How difficult was it back then, and how easy or difficult it is today?
Okay, long time back, when I was working with deaf associations, we used a lot of handwritten letters and the postal devices and the postal system. And later on, after 20 years, at that point of time, we didn't use much of SMS. Like we're sending money, we have to use the money order system. So it was all getting delayed. Anything, everything. For example, sports events and any kind of meetings, we have to write to them 2 months in advance for the postal system to reach them. Right now, the whole generation has changed completely. So, like for any kind of big conference, we just inform them 3 months in advance. So it wasn't like this long time back. For example, if I want to communicate with my father or my mother or my friends, I need to write a letter and then it reaches them after a week. For example, if I want to visit a friend to meet him and speak to him, I have no idea whether he's there at home. I need to go all the way to his house and then I find his house locked and then, so many issues like that. But right now, it's very easy. I just ask them, you know, message them whether they are there or not. And even for sending money, we have this new apps called with Google Pay. So there's no need to send a check or a money order. So and wait for a week or 2 weeks and then get the money credited in the account. So there's a lot of difference. We had a lot of issues long time back, and with technology, everything is now very smooth. Thank you. This is Rahul. So with a lot of youth, the youth right now are more habituated with technology because right now technology is very visual. So we can easily access the different apps, for example, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So all this kind of social media we are able to use. So a lot of deaf people post a lot of video messages. And like for us, for the youth, it's very easy for us to get a lot of information and there's a lot of entertainment. Everything is ready, I know who the person is there, who's on the video. It's very easy to communicate with the people. For example, we can, have a live chat and other people can watch us having a live chat. For example, in Instagram and Facebook. Usually, initially Facebook wasn't used much, but not much now. So, like the social media, for example, Instagram, deaf people are really using that a lot. At that point of time, communication was very difficult. People used to feel very lonely. So, like in older ages, like when people have to communicate, they have to meet at a place and then, they talk to each other. But nowadays, we don't have to get out. We can just sit at home and then communicate with each other and interact. So that's how technology is being used right now. For the elderly people right now, they are not much used to using Instagram. So what they do is probably they use WhatsApp and do a video call, and they are also not much used to Facebook. Probably some of them just use Facebook to just see the pictures and all that. So many of them are not very used to technology and the latest apps, but the youth are very, very into it. Thank you.
Great. Yes.
Okay, this is Gopalakrishnan, sir. For booking train tickets, like previously I had to fill up a form, stand in the queue, and then give it at the counter and get the tickets booked. Sometimes they say the tickets aren't available. But now with the latest technology, we are able to find out if there's availability, seat and berth availability, and easily book tickets, even for flight tickets. Previously, we have no idea if you want to book a flight ticket, we have no idea what is the price. We have to go to the airport office to, book tickets. But nowadays, it's very easy. Previously, we had a lot of issues, but nowadays things have become very easy for us. Thank you.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Gopalakrishnan and Rahul. Yes, technology has definitely changed for every one of us, but especially for deaf people, I think it has given a lot more connection within your community, within people outside as well, where sign language has gained popularity, has become a medium of communication for people to also recognize that sign language is a way and easier and complete way of communication, because there are people who are deaf who also don't use sign language because of the choices that their parents would have taken for them at a very young age. But later on, when they grow up, which is after their adolescence, they do see a different world. They come in contact with the deaf community and they see that there is a visual language which is even more easier to communicate, to express oneself, everything that is possible, to learn anything possible. Because having the difficulty of hearing does pose a lot of challenges to access the spoken language. So thank you very much to both the presenters today. So Dr. Haim, if there are any questions that anybody would like to ask, I think they can go ahead and ask. And today, it's the end of today's session.
Great, Neeta. Thank you, Neeta, Gopalakrishnan, and Rahul. Thank you so much. I think the listeners can send chat messages to ask questions. And those who are not able to send messages that way can also use mic, I guess. But can I ask a couple of questions to begin with, Neeta?
Sure.
Yeah. One is that listening to all three of you, I'm amazed about so much about the beauty of using hands and face. I wish I could touch Rahul's and Gopalakrishnan's hands and feel how they sign. Yeah, but more fundamentally, I think the lecture method that we adopt in schools and colleges have in some way destroyed our capacity to use facial expressions and gestures with more freedom and facility. What I'm going to ask is, what do you think are the greatest advantages of now in the 21st century being bilingual, meaning use as a sign language user and oral language user? If I can cross both the languages with a facility, will there be a special advantage? I mean, I think that is what we should advocate for a fuller expression, a facility to cross the medium and the languages and the cultures, if you like. Do I make sense, Nita?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. I think that adds to our presentation today as well. Your question is so pertinent. We are talking about sign language. However, as we know and as we have, I think the presenters have also said that this is a visual language where it is not written. It doesn't have a script. It cannot be written. And for reading and writing, we have to use a written language or a spoken language. There are many languages, as we know also, which don't have scripts. Like we've got Lombardy, we've got many other languages which we know. Though they're all spoken, but you don't have a script of its own. So similarly, sign language is that way. And bilingualism is what we are very strongly advocating, because we need to have communication and a medium of learning the way it is today. It's all, you've got textbooks, you've got written material, a lot of it around, so which all needs to be accessed as well. So bilingual way is the way forward, where sign language becomes a medium of instruction, whereas there is another language which is learned through which they can read and write. This is for the deaf people, but otherwise also, if we want to promote sign language as another language, like we have other languages in school, this is a thought that I'm going really way forward. Okay, so there are some countries like UK, the Britain, they have already started advocating it, where any school, any child, whether they are deaf or not, should have an opportunity to choose sign language as a language that they want to learn, along with any other languages that they are learning. So I hope we will get there too here. But definitely, to answer your question, and I don't know if I'm answering it to the point, bilingualism is definitely the way forward. And having expertise in 2 or more languages is definitely helpful.
Thank you, Nita. That was very useful. I also want to ask about, sorry, I'm taking everybody's space, but I thought if you could also mention a little bit about hearing aids and the medical model, because people would say, well, if I can restore your hearing capacity, why all this fuss? So that's the approach of the medic. I mean, a rigid medic. Would you like to talk about it?
Sure. I'll just quickly check with either Mr. Gopalakrishnan or Rahul if they want to take that question, and I can add at the end.
So about hearing aids and like those kind of systems, that's all fine. And they're able to hear, but like other things are also involved, like parents' love and care. All that is involved. If he's able to like use hearing aids at all the time for 24 hours a day, and if the parents are able to take care of him, then it is fine. But for other deaf people, it's very difficult, to have hearing aids all the time and to keep hearing, listening to sounds all the time, and about parents and the care that they give, and like there are a lot of other issues. So there are some children in, there are some schools, for example, Bala Vidyalaya in Chennai. So they, like focus much on speech. So, like for other children who don't get much attention from the parents, so what do they do? You take my example. Initially, I used to have, I use hearing aids a lot, but it was very, very uncomfortable for me. And, like I could repeat very little, and even my speech is not very clear. So it's sign language is much comfortable for me. So it depends on the person, on the child. And this is Rahul. So for your information, like for hearing people who can hear completely, like so-called normal people, and for those using hearing aids, and like they have undergo a lot of therapy and training, for them to speak and hear just like a hearing person, it's very difficult. It's very difficult if one speaks really fast, and like you have to keep looking at that person's face directly. But if there is a crowd of people and a lot of people speak at the same time, so it's very difficult for us to identify who is speaking what. It's very confusing. And thirdly, like if for some, for deaf children, like they can read what is there on the textbook or what is printed, but the concept and everything is very difficult for them to understand. So the deaf child using speech only, it's not easy for them to be just like a hearing person. But for those deaf children who are using sign language, the concepts and everything is very well developed. So mentally, they are much equal to hearing people. So I would like to just let you know about this.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just add there. So deafness is a spectrum, if you can say, because there are varying degrees of hearing loss. And if we have a technology like a hearing aid or cochlear implant, this, like Rahul was saying, can help to a certain extent. You cannot restore the hearing completely, as against the popular myth that you put a hearing aid and the person becomes hearing, or you have a cochlear implant and the person becomes 100% hearing. So that's actually a misconception. So the hearing aid is able to help the residual hearing of whatever is there for the person. However, there are a lot of different sounds. And as we know, sounds are divided into, sounds can be measured either on the intensity or the frequency, any sound. And depending on a person's hearing loss, some of the sounds, if you can amplify the sound level, that means the volume, and you have ways to amplify or ways to even incorporate the frequency level. But it is not possible or it is not successful in every person because it depends on the hearing loss. Now, like Mr. Gopalakrishnan or Rahul, both of them are profoundly deaf, which is the highest in the spectrum of deafness. So the lowest will be a mild hearing loss, which is somewhere between 25 to 40% of hearing loss, whereas the rest 60% is still functional. And then you've got moderate hearing loss, then you've got a severe hearing loss category, and you've got a profound hearing loss category. So for profound hearing loss people, it's really difficult because very, very minuscule amount of residual hearing, which even with the help of these technologies you cannot hear speech. Regular speech is not comprehensible. Well, but there could be cases where people would come up and say, with speech therapy, with the technology used, they are still able to cope. And how is it possible? That is because of something called lip reading, which deaf people can do. It is a can do, and I'm being very specific because not all of them can do it. It's a skill, and it has to be learned. You have to be able to lip read. And like Mr. Gopalakrishnan started off his presentation by saying how difficult it was for him to understand some of the similar looking words on the lips, like slow, blow, something like that, right? It looks very similar and it could become very confusing because you have to constantly try to match to the context. And it becomes very strenuous as well. So they are definitely aids which can improve a person's hearing capability to a certain extent, but it is not suitable for all. So like we have choices for any technology or any aids that any of us would like to take, this is a choice that should be there for the parents or the deaf person themselves to choose.
Do we have further questions, Neeta?
There are a lot of questions actually on the chat, if I can start taking them.
Okay.
Right, so we have a question from Kartika. She asks, is Indian Sign Language the same everywhere in India? Can a deaf person from Tamil Nadu interact with a person in Uttar Pradesh? Yes, so Mr. Gopalakrishnan is answering that.
Yes, I saw that question. This is from Gopalakrishnan, sir. Kartika has asked this question, whether Indian Sign Language is the same. It's not completely the same. 80% of the words the signs use are the same, but 20% might be different. For example, the days of the week, families, the signs for families and relations. Those might be a little different, but the basic way of signing is the same. So, for example, for mother, you have 3 different signs. For father, you have different signs. For brother, or for the sign for sister. For example, we have this sign for sister, this sign for aunt and uncle. And even some of the signs for the numerals, the numbers, are different. For example, in the north, they sign 9 like that. In the south, they sign the number 9 in a different way. But the way sign language is used, like facial expressions and everything, it's the same throughout. Thank you for your question.
Great. Yes, Thank you for that question, Karthika. Yes, anyone from Tamil Nadu can definitely talk to another person in Uttar Pradesh. Unlike Tamil and Hindi, which are so very different and they find it difficult to communicate. But like Mr. Gopalakrishnan said, 80% is the same, whereas just 20% variance is there based on the local culture and local traditions that are there.
So perhaps in that sense, it's the only pan-Indian language.
You could say that.
Okay.
Definitely.
Sunita says that Dr. Hem has said that spoken languages are different, but ISL can be considered as the pan-India language. So Gopalakrishnan sir says that even, like it's kind of a universal language which we can use.
Right. So I have another question from Sonal Sinha, and her question is, as they said, deaf adolescents come across established sign language at a later stage. So are they able to learn it properly, or do they face problem and are not fluent? Is there any acquisition and learning process in these as well? Does anybody, either Mr. Gopalakrishnan or Rahul, they want to answer?
This is Rahul here.
Read the question again. So deaf adolescents come across sign language at a later age. Are they able to learn it properly, or do they face any problems to become fluent signs? And is there a process for acquisition and learning?
This is Rahul here. So I have a friend of mine who is a deaf person. He's kind of hard of hearing. So he was mainstream in school. He doesn't sign after his 12th. So for him, like when he uses hearing aids, when he meets other deaf people who use sign language, like for him, when he meets a deaf person who uses sign language for the first time, is it difficult for him? It is not much difficult. It is easy for him to learn sign language. If he visits the deaf community, for example, the deaf associations and the clubs, if he visits them, interacts with a lot of deaf people regularly, then it's very easy for him to learn sign language easily, and he can acquire the same skill as another person. So probably his written or spoken languages might be better. So for a deaf person who uses sign language since childhood and is in a school for the deaf, where he doesn't have good education, he might have very good sign language skills, but probably the spoken language skills are not good. For the first case, his spoken language and sign language are good, but maybe his concepts, the capacity is not that much as a deaf person who uses sign language since childhood. So there are slight differences in that. I hope it is clear.
Great.
Perhaps a person who is learning from childhood, sign language becomes that person's second nature. Maybe for an adult, it takes a while. Maybe it's like me learning a new language now. It won't become my second nature, part of my system. I'm just thinking aloud. I may be wrong.
Yeah, it is possible for them to learn it a little slower, maybe, but we have seen cases where they pick it up faster than any other spoken language because it's so visual. It is something that they come across in a community setting. And because they are part of that community and they keep going there more often and are associated with them, they pick up the language much faster than we would learning a different language. Okay, so I have more questions here. Mehak Oberoi. So, what are the difficulties faced career wise as a deaf person? And is there any discrimination in the hiring process?
So this is Gopalakrishnan here. Previously, during the 1980s, at 1981, we celebrated the World Disability Year. So the year was celebrated as the World Disability Year. So at that point of time, the All India Federation of the Deaf, we had a lot of deaf members who weren't very educated, probably didn't even complete the 8th standard. So before that particular year, we had a lot of people who could go for, low-level jobs or something like that, like a technician or electrician or a plumber or something like that. So So since then, since 1981, deaf people were able to find a lot of employment, low-level employment. But after, the 1995 Act, the new Persons with Disability Act, so we had some reservations for disabled people and things like that. So after that, things became a little difficult. Deaf people had to have certification and certain certificates to get jobs. So when we had the new law which had come up, after that we had a lot of issues finding employment. But before the 1995 Act, deaf people were able to find jobs pretty easily. So that is the difference. Yeah, Rahul here. In terms of employment, so you had asked if there's some kind of discrimination happening when people are selected for jobs. So we have certain cases, but we don't have proper data yet. So we are trying to get the proper data. For example, if a deaf person wants to go for a government or a private job, then whether they're able to communicate at the workplace. And we have, like we're trying to get the data for cases where they have applied for a job, but they haven't been selected, probably because the interview process was not convenient for them. And if there are cases where, like some deaf people who use hearing aids and are able to communicate using speech are selected. So according to the law, 1% of jobs must be reserved for hearing impaired people. So we are trying to, like advocate that, half of that must be given to profound and half of them to hard of hearing. So we are still working towards that. We don't have the data, proper data yet to work on. So we're still analyzing that.
Thank you, Rahul. We have more questions. So we have Amal Jude Ashwin asking, why does sign language have different vocabularies for words across the world, but fingerspelling is only based on English script? Doesn't it contradict with the mother tongue of the signer?
I didn't understand that question, Nita.
Okay. So from what I understand, so sign language has various components. So one of it is finger spelling, to spell out probably a name or a place. So proper nouns are, spelled out using finger spelling. So the finger spelling is mostly in English. So you've got A, B, C, D, all on the fingers it's being spelled. So the question pertains to having different vocabularies for words across the world, because sign languages are different across the world, just like how we have different languages, spoken languages. But the question is, why do we follow English alphabet finger spelling, and why not any other language? Then how does it help with the mother tongue concept? So that's the question, and I hope I got that question right.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Rahul here. So, like globally, we have different kinds of sign languages and they have their own vocabulary. So that has been developed, like that's been emerged naturally, in those places. So, but we do use a new convention. Like for example, if there isn't a sign for a particular word, then we use spoken language. We use the finger spelling. So I'm just repeating what Rahul was saying. So globally, there are a lot of sign languages which has been used. Their vocabulary is different. So finger spelling is used only when you come across a new word for which you don't know the sign language for. So right now, there's a new system which is being developed. Like where you can actually write the sign language down. For example, the sign for COVID is this. So previously, we did not have the sign for COVID-19 virus. So later on, when the pandemic happened and when people could actually visualize the how the virus is, so slowly the deaf community actually invented a new sign for COVID-19. So nowadays, globally, the sign for COVID-19 is the same. So, like sign languages, in sign languages, we can invent new signs. That's what I meant. Sorry.
Okay. So next question I have here is following to the previous question, we're asking the universal form of sign language. Is there a universal form of sign language to aid communication, not limited by geographical boundaries?
Yeah, this is Rahul here. Yes, we have two sets of language that I use. One is Indian Sign Language, another one is International Sign. International Sign is not a conventional language as such, but it's mostly a visual gestural language, which is mostly used in conferences and big gatherings where people from different countries, they come together. So during that time, we use International Sign. This is a more visual language, and the signs are much slower. We use a lot of expressions, so it's very easy for us to comprehend what the sign is. So, uh, recently when I visit a lot of countries, I don't have any issues communicating with them because I use a lot of international sign. Maybe, like when I visit a place, I spend around a week with them, then I can easily understand the signs. So right now I'm a member of the board of WR, the World Federation of the Deaf Youth Section. So we have different members from different countries. So we communicate using international signs, so we don't have any issues to communicate with each other. So Mr. Gopalakrishnan would like to add. So like we mentioned before, in India, 80% of the signs are the same and 20% is different. So similarly, throughout the world, we use a lot of gestures. So locally, for their particular country, they might have their own vocabulary. Even for while finger spelling, we use the two-handed finger spelling in India. And in America, they use the one-handed finger spelling. And certain other countries, they have their own finger spelling too. I think around 70 to 80% we are able to sign and understand each other very well. So just like Rahul mentioned, we can use international sign and we can easily communicate with others.
Great. I'm very aware of the time, but we have some really questions still lined up. What do you suggest we do?
Probably we have another 4-5 days. Nita, they can come back with the same questions or added. They might have changed their thoughts about these questions as they evolve, like 4-5 days.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Gopalakrishnan sir, Rahul, and Nita.
Yes.
You want to have the final word just by way of conclusion today?
Rahul and Mr. Gopalakrishnan say thank you.
Gopalakrishnan sir.
So this is Gopalakrishnan, sir. So we have completed the session today. So I hope to see all of you tomorrow for another energetic session tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for organizing this workshop and this first day.
Thank you so much for the three of you and a huge audience out there. Wish you all a great evening. Bye-bye.